Goldfinger 64 really stands out to me for a variety of reasons. It's really an ambitious project, and the scope of it itself really deserves some attention and praise. It's probably the first full-blown full conversion mod for GoldenEye 007. It's an entire fan game based off the concept of Rare making another James Bond game instead of a license going to EA and them making their own stuff while Rare made Perfect Dark. It's neat, and I really like how it still works within the boundaries of the N64 while pushing the aspects of the game forward with different aspects that were discovered since the development of the GoldenEye setup editor. There's a lot of time and love and care put into it. Like, all 20 levels of the original GoldenEye are completely changed up. Like, this isn't even like Rickroll-Eye, where levels are flipped or there are texture changes. These are full-on geometry changes, objective changes. It's really impressive, just the scope of everything. On top of there being new multiplayer levels and cheats and lots of new weapons and character models, in of itself, I'd say that deserves a lot of praise. The problem comes with the execution of the mod, and I can understand that there are some hiccups. Not every level is going to be perfect. I don't think people are going to be putting Control or Caverns in their top 10 levels from GoldenEye anytime soon. There are always going to be some frustrating ones, but the problem with Goldfinger 64, in my opinion, is that it has roughly the same hits and misses, give or take. Maybe a few more hits when it comes to the levels. Let's just start off simply, though. Goldfinger 64 is the fan-made adaptation of the 1960s film Goldfinger, one of the most well-known James Bond films, and it tries to recreate the film's plot within the setting of the N64 levels, similar to how GoldenEye did, where there are some direct adaptations of the movie's events, some looser interpretations, and some areas that fill in gaps left by the movie. You go around levels and complete objectives, trying to minimize civilian casualties or maintain stealth. Technology is more primitive at the time, but you still encounter things like cameras or mounted guns or other things of that sort. And you have a variety of gadgets to work with as well. There's a good mix of stealth and action, and there are even some vehicle segments as well, including the return of the tank in a very wide open and tense battle to get to Fort Knox. And the weapons are a good variety of items from the early Cold War era. I really like that selection. I feel like it has some of the most aesthetic value. So you've got classics like the M1 Garand and M1 Carbine making comebacks, but then you've also got M14s and several different handguns and revolvers, an AK, the AR-7, which was a really interesting choice, but that was in the original movie, a golf club, and other stuff. And of course, Oddjob's hat, since the character himself appears once again. They're good weapons, and they feel different, they sound different, they have good punchiness to them, aside from a few exceptions, and they usually fit the levels they're in. So there's always some cool variety. You never know what you're going to encounter next. The problem, I suppose, is where the game starts. Opening level should be accessible, but it should also give you a taste of things to come and start you off on a positive note. And GoldenEye 007 did a really good job of that with Dam. That starts out very simply. If you're playing on agent difficulty, you're just running through there to jump off the dam and get to the facility below. But it gets more complex as you choose different difficulties and objectives. It's also a good introduction for players because it's not too punishing if you're playing the game for the first time. You're just running from one end to the next. And you're also figuring out mechanics as you go. Like, you can have the alarm sound without failing the level. So it's a good way to get used to the game, and when you revisit it in higher difficulties, it gets recontextualized, because then there are more objectives to do, so it adds on to the replay value. The opening level of Goldfinger 64, by contrast, is not a good precedent for things to come. The Cartel level sounds like it should be pretty awesome. It sounds like it should be some action-packed, thrilling gun battle or stealthy gameplay area set in some sort of warehouse or like the outskirts of some cartel settlement. But instead, it's a really dark slog through these really big refinery buildings where you're throwing timed explosives in there, and the game doesn't really give you a good idea of how many to expect, how to set the bombs properly, or even where some of them are. There are a grand total of 6 within the initial area, which is very dark and very tough to navigate. Even using the 1964 emulator, the fog's thick and you can't really see that far away, especially since enemies are shooting at you. But also, not all of the refineries you need to blow up are there. So, oftentimes you'll just end up failing it because you won't even know what to do. I remember having to look up a guide the first time I played it because I was so confused. Opening level is a pretty big letdown, but fortunately the next 2 make up for it. Bodega is everything the Cartel should have been. It's a fun battle through a hotel that involves a minor boss battle and a good hostage situation to defuse, with close quarter combat and an exciting gun battle through a basement area that you have to find access to. So you're hunting for secrets and gathering up weapons and things of that sort. Feels much more like this should have been the opening level. Miami only adds on to that. It's a big open level, some parts of it chug on hardware, but it's really breathtaking what they did with the existing technology of the N64. And the hotel part of it also, where you're climbing to the top floor to investigate Goldfinger's suite. That is a very great segment, because it also has that door-to-door room clearing. Feels like a very light version of Ready or Not or SWAT 4, with the addition of great weapons like the M1911 and the Tommy gun, which will basically carry you through any level you get your hands on with those. If the M1911 ever shows up in a level in this mod, you take it. It is easily one of the best guns, like 2-shotting most enemies easily. And the Tommy gun is basically the RCP-90 of the game, with 100 rounds and a zooming option. It's strange that there's a stick mag version, because it only shows up in one level that I could think of, and it's pretty much inferior to the drum mag version. Well, that's a topic for another time. The remaining levels follow the story of Goldfinger with some creative additions. Some are a little too lenient with how the storyline goes. They try to make gameplay segments out of iconic settings when it doesn't really make much sense. Like when you're at Goldfinger's stud farm and he talks to you about his plan and James figures it out. After he leaves to collect his gold from Mr. Solo, the player just kind of wanders around the farm and fights his henchmen. And it's really strange that you just get into this active gunfight walking around completely unsupervised the moment he turns his back. Same goes for prison, where you basically fight your way through the prison to get information, and in the end you don't escape or anything. They're just totally cool with you gunning down dozens of their men. Another strange level is Airport, and it's funny because it's a good level otherwise. It's a shorter one, but it's a fun close quarter level where you're trying to navigate through the airport to tail Goldfinger's plane, and the security have been hired to bump you off before then. So you're trying to fight your way through there, but also avoid injuring any civilians in the process. But it's completely untextured. Well, there's one texture throughout the entire thing. And there are some props there that would be fitting for an airport, but there are no planes or like couches or anything of that sort, any sort of areas to rest at, any vendors. It feels very unfinished. I think that Grassloo said that they were going to revisit it later on. I'm not sure if that update ever came out. I mean, the geometry feels like it would fit the finished level. It just needs, I don't know, maybe some of the prop planes from the later levels with the Pussy Galore, or maybe, I don't know, some of the casual props from Clubhouse. It's just kind of weird that it's kind of unfinished, very much so. I guess they just wanted to get it out alongside the other levels, which are complete though. That's the only exception that I can think of. Every other level is beautifully decorated and well set up. I can't find fault with the way that they look. It's just that some of them aren't really as optimized for Nintendo 64 hardware. You can put the game on an EverDrive, and you can play it on consoles. I've had fun doing that actually, especially playing multiplayer with friends, but there are some levels where it's really too demanding, and you have to play it on an emulator for the best experience. Alps is a good example of that, as is Shipyard and Cartel, where it's just there's so much wide area and so much going on that the frame rate really gets hit hard. And unfortunately, there are more than a few of these wide open levels, and a lot of them are really darkly lit, so you'll have a tough time navigating through them as well. You're sort of just fumbling through the dark, trying to vaguely figure out what your objectives are. I mean, this goes for a hideout, goes for Shipyard, Cartel, among others, and it's just really odd, because there were some levels in the first GoldenEye that had that approach of being more wide open, having you figure out your objectives as you go, but these felt downright cryptic in a way. The comparisons to Caverns or to even Control really came to mind. Or even Statue, but Statue isn't too bad once you get the idea of where to go. I'm not sure how I would fix them, aside from maybe making the fog lighter somehow. But there are still really good aspects to the mod. I've been nagging on it, and I think it deserves praise where it's due. Clubhouse and Grounds are fantastic levels that really embody the whole James Bond atmosphere of stealth and action and using gadgets and classy atmospheres, so on and so forth. In Clubhouse, you're trying to get info on Goldfinger and replace his original golfing partner, all while security who are armed with carbines and Garans and over-under shotguns are trying to stop you. And Grounds has you disable the security's vehicles and bug Goldfinger's car after he pays them to knock you off, since you beat him in a game of golf, with the highlight being a golf club you can pick up and use against enemies. I mean, since it's a wider open level, there are fewer opportunities to use it, but it's hilarious when you do get the chance to smack people around with it. China's also a really thrilling level where you're going through this factory, and after interrupting a meeting with one of the movie's main antagonists, and it's like this gauntlet of enemies that you have to get through while avoiding hurting the factory workers. And that was a really cool setup as well, a unique location with unique enemies. And the finale levels are good too. Vaults is a good final boss battle with Oddjob that pays tribute to the movie's ending, and it gives you access to the hat that you can use against enemies, with a nice standoff at the end where you have to hold line while the bomb in Fort Knox gets defused. And Plane's a good finale to the game that gives you a nice showdown with Goldfinger and a good sort of pistols-only combat scenario where some of the lesser used handguns get to shine. In addition, there are 2 bonus levels that you unlock after beating the game on Secret Agent or 00 Agent. One is based on Dr. No, and the other, I believe, is based on Thunderball, but I'm not 100% certain. Either way, they're nice additions, and it's cool that they're present as bonus content alongside the usual cheats and other things you can unlock, which includes some weapons not normally available, like the laser, the cutting laser from that infamous scene where he's like, "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die," or the golden magnum that Goldfinger wields in his final boss appearance. They're cool, and they're nice additions to an already fun game with a lot of replay value, because when the levels are good, they're really good. They really don't hold back on the quality. Multiplayer is also really nice. Again, some of the levels are a little too detailed, and they can suffer a little bit on hardware, but otherwise it performs well, and I know I've had some really fun encounters in China and Mall playing those multiplayer with friends. The weapon selection really adds to the charm as well. I'll admit though, I think the shotgun's kind of underpowered, at least compared to the other guns. It's also strange how it has this golden appearance. In some lights it appears silver, which would be the normal Mariner appearance, but a lot of times it looks like it's gold-plated, like the gold Magnum. I'm not sure if it's a mistake with the textures, or if it's just something else. But that's a minor gripe in the grand scheme of things. I think Goldfinger's successes outweigh its faults. It's imperfect, but it's really ambitious, and the parts that shine really stand out. I'm not sure if it's ever going to be updated to finish the airport level. I hope it does someday. I would also hope that maybe a few of its items could be added to GoldenEye X now that that's getting updated, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I'm just glad we got this, because it was announced back in like the 2010s, like the early 2010s. I didn't think it'd ever be finished, but lo and behold, they did it in 2017. I think it's really admirable, and I think it's cool what they've done. They've basically made a full conversion mod for a game that came out over 20 years ago. They showed a lot more love to the James Bond license and franchise than MGM or Xbox or Nintendo have to this day. I mean, gone are the days of quality games like Nightfire. The recent port of GoldenEye was just kind of a disgrace. So if you're looking for a new experience that would harken back to the days of GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, or Time Splitters, or even James Bond Nightfire, I'd recommend giving Goldfinger 64 a shot. Just push past the first level and you'll be on your way to some thrilling experiences that'll harken back to the good days of the original's successes. It's worth playing, but either on emulator or with an EverDrive. I wouldn't buy a cartridge of it because you wouldn't be able to update it compared to the flash cart of the EverDrive. Playing on emulator is usually the better choice thanks to benefits like 60 frames per second and keyboard and mouse support, but it's a personal choice. I started with hardware, then I switched to an emulator, and both turned out really well. So in the end, I'd say give it a shot. And shout out to the crew behind making the mod, because what you guys did was a true service to the community of old shooters like that. Thanks for watching. Take care.